One really quick note before we get started. HBO Max has the episodes arranged very strangely for seasons, and they actually have what was for airing the end of season 2 set up as the start of season 3. So while this is going to be a season 2 review, I'm actually not going to end up talking about the finale because I thought it was part of season 3, just because HBO Max is weird. So finale stuff will actually be talked about when I talk about season 3. Sorry, it's strange. That's just how it went. All right, here we go.
And Steven! Yep. Steven Universe continuing. These might be coming relatively rapidly. Cause I gotta tell you, my kid really loves this show. And being short in 11 minutes, it's a little snacky thing where I feel like if she's like done homework, or maybe if she's only got one thing left, to just watch one quick one together and then scoot her back off. I feel like that works. So, Steven Universe Season 2. What's interesting in terms of these seasons is they don't have these grand season finales. The sort of the way I'm used to. So we actually got started on the third season, and I didn't even realize it except for the numbering on the episode. I wouldn't have thought that the episode that was the last one of season 2 would have been a last episode, but okay. Part of me wonders if the season cutoffs are somewhat arbitrary, but in any case, still liking it. It's sinking a bit more in terms of giving more concrete background on the gems in specific. It's interesting watching that play out and realizing how divergent the gems we know are, because and like I knew this was gonna kind of be the case. It was kind of what I talked about in the first review, like knowing some stuff just by osmosis. But in terms of how it's presented, you would think of the crystal gems as just kind of superheroes. But the more you find out about them, gradually drip fed, and learning about their race, and learning that like they're not unique, that pearl, amethyst, that's not really a name, that's just what they are. And there are theoretically dozens, if not hundreds, of others just like them, of the same kind. And that creates a more interesting dynamic. And I like the way that it unfolds, because like you could lore dump this all at the front end, or you could give us what seems like a little team of effectively superheroes, and then give us context for them over time. And that's also a tricky thing to do, because I remember comics in the 90s which were super fond of dropping in the middle of something and being like, "Ooh, there's some mysterious thing about this character. Don't you want to find out?" No, I don't, because they're gritty and boring and have too many pouches and guns bigger than their entire torsos, and they are not interesting. But that's the potential risk when you are gonna just drip feed information as time goes on, as opposed to present something a bit more, not complete, but a bit fuller than this does. But they've got it balanced really well. This season, I think she was initially introduced last season, but now this season has solidified Peridot as my kid's favorite, or as she has come to call her, the angry Dorito. So, Peridot, you know what Peridot makes me think of? Peridot is like Entrapta from She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, if the joy was dialed down from an 11 to a 1. Has that same sort of mentality, like looking at things very systematically, very factually, very data gathering based. But whereas Entrapta in that show was like, "Ooh, science!" And like was super excitable about it. Peridot is a bit on the jaded side, and a bit more like, "Look, I'm just trying to do a thing. Leave me alone. Let me do it." She's not excited. She doesn't want to, she just wants to do it. But that's kind of her attitude. It's a little bit of the voice too, actually, come to think of it. But my kid loves her a lot. I think due in no small part to just being able to call her the angry Dorito. What this season has done for me is solidified Garnet as my own favorite. I already kind of gushed about the spoilers for season 1, the reveal of Garnet as a fusion in my review of the first season. And the more time we spend with Garnet and like learn more about fusions, like what the part, and this was part of the last episode, the part that really got me thinking was when we find out that fusions between two different gems was seen as profane, as an abomination, as unnatural. And what was interesting about that, and then to see Garnet newly fused encounter Rose Quartz, and the conversation that they have made me realize that while fusion absolutely is unquestionably in many ways a metaphor for sex or deeply intimate and personal relationships, and one could see the fusion as basically just like the manifestation of a ship in some ways. It has more application than that. And it's always tricky to do something that adds newer potential interpretations to something that you've done that already feels like it's metaphorical. Because if you do that wrong, then it muddies the waters and it just seems like you don't know what you want this to mean. But fusion seems so clearly outlined before. I think it felt very clear that they knew what they wanted it to mean. But now it's started to take on other meanings that I'm not even going to guarantee intentional, but I'm going to say applicable readings. Because between the reaction in the flashback episode that we see of other gems when they see Garnet, two different gems fused together, and that very negative reaction, the sort of internalized sense that between Ruby and Sapphire, that what they're doing is wrong. And then there's a line that Garnet has talking to Rose Quartz. And this one hit me. I wrote it down. Why am I so sure I'd rather be this than everything I was supposed to be? Now you could read that newly added element and aspect of fusion as being a metaphor for any number of things. If we're going to stick with the fusion as sex and or romantic relationship angle, then one could treat it as a metaphor for forbidden pairings. So potentially homosexual relationships. But for me, that moment read incredibly trans-applicable, because many people come to a sense of their transness in many different ways and at many different points and at many different paces. And I've known trans people who, for one reason or another, have had that moment where they first start to dip into really exploring the possibilities of their gender expression, and have a moment of, why does this feel so right? And what does this mean for everything I was supposed to be? And it's something that can be exciting and thrilling and terrifying. And I feel like in a kid accessible, kid digestible way, the show was able to explore that idea. And it probably, I mean, it definitely has applications to other things as well. But like that spoke to my transness in a way that I really enjoyed. I'm not sure there's going to be too much length to this review because, like, the episodes are so short and snacky, and like the major things here for me were Peridot and the specific episode highlight the flashback on Garnet. But oh, geez, can't believe I almost didn't talk about this. I really appreciate the exploration through Pearl and the moves she makes to, let's not be coy about it, trick and coerce Garnet into fusing with her. And confronting that as the deep betrayal of trust that it is. Not just because she was causing the gems to go off on senseless errands, which is a waste of time and resources, especially when there's an actual threat out there, but because fusion is supposed to mean something. And when you cause it to come about under false pretenses, you disrespect that. You undermine what this is supposed to mean. And again, in a metaphorical and child digestible way, it's a good statement on informed consent, because there's a lot involved in consent. Consent is vital. Consent is so important. But consent can't just be, hey, do you want to do this? You have to be sure that the circumstances under which you are even presenting that question are fair and honest. And that was what Pearl manipulated. The question of, will you fuse with me, was sincere, but the circumstances were orchestrated and false. She took advantage. She deceived someone who thought that Pearl would take this as seriously and as preciously as it's supposed to be taken, and she didn't. And I like that it was handled the way it was handled. I like how slow it was for Garnet to be comfortable being around Pearl again. Because, yeah, that's valid. She felt violated. She felt taken advantage of. Yeah, she has a right to time and distance. So that was the other thing. I'm glad I remembered it. Whew, that was the other thing I wanted to be sure that I talked about, because that was this show it's sneaking some real good stuff in under the radar. I say under the radar. I'm catching it, but like, to me, it doesn't feel like it's ever stopping to go like, and the lesson today, kids. Instead, it's just presenting stories that make these lessons, these thoughts, these concepts very clear within the context of a story and of these characters. Looking forward to more. Steven Universe Season 2. What'd you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Like, share, subscribe. Patreon. That's how I pay my bills. And all kinds of perks for all levels. You can see the docket, vote on topics, commission me for reviews if you want, etc., etc., etc. Don't worry too much about it, though. Like, share, subscribe. They help me out. Links to other stuff down in the description. But don't worry too much about any of it, because you know what? We take a relaxed attitude around here. So you can just come on back next time you need a break. Patreon shout-outs. Thank you to Turok, Shane Ross, Oliver B., Melinda Walters, Robin Powell, Chronobulax, the Poodle, Edelon, Tracy Scrabbit, Dharma Michael Doyle, Vincent Paul Bartolucci, Angry Caspero, Adam Lefty Taylor, Robin Moore, Shayla Gourlay, and Bookworm. You can support me as well. Hear me mispronounce your name. Sure, I got some of those wrong.